On-the-scene coverage of ACC 2015 is supported by Effient.
I'm Peter Block here in San Diego for ACC 2015 for On the Scene, and with me is Sabina Murphy. Sabina has been involved with the TIMI group and the Improve It trial particularly, a trial where we know that ezetimibe added to simvastatin is a good thing because it lowers LDL cholesterol further, but now we have acute coronary syndrome. So Sabina, tell me about this part of the trial, the data that you've evaluated, and also sort of the new way you've looked at secondary endpoints.
Sure. So in the Improve It trial, there were 5,300 first primary endpoint events. And so the data that were reported last year for the primary endpoint reduction with the combination therapy used those 5,300 events. However, when you look at all of the primary endpoint events that occurred in the trial, there were actually 9,500 such events, meaning that there are about 4,300 events that weren't even analyzed initially. So what we did was we looked at the total number of events that a patient could have experienced in the trial and compared them between the two treatment groups.
So, let me give you an example of what I think is going on here. You have a patient that comes back after the beginning of the trial with an event, but they're still followed and they may have further events. So those events are what sort of tack up those numbers. Is that right? Is that fair?
Exactly. So in a trial, as I said, in the model for the analysis, we're only looking at the first event. But really, if that first event is a non-fatal event, the patient will stay in the trial. They'll continue to potentially have events. In Improve It, the follow-up was 6 years for the median. And so what's really important to the patient and also to the clinician managing that patient, it's not just the first event, but really all of the events that occurred, the total cardiovascular burden, if you will.
Okay, so this is an acute coronary syndrome trial, and I have to ask you, what did you find?
Sure. So we found that there was, in fact, a reduction in the primary endpoint when looking at total number of events. And actually, the number of events prevented with combination therapy with ezetimibe plus simvastatin was actually slightly more than doubled when you looked at total events instead of just considering the first event. And we looked at not just the primary endpoint, but the three secondary endpoints, as well as the harder exploratory endpoint of CV death, MI, or stroke. And we found that there was a similar reduction with more aggressive lipid-lowering therapy with ezetimibe plus simvastatin over simvastatin alone.
So for the viewers, this is really sort of a unique way of looking at multiple endpoints that patients generate over time. And with that, you get a lot more information about how good or how bad your combination therapy really is. I think that's probably right?
Absolutely. And it's something that we do occasionally in our long-term ACS trials, but not all that often. It's much more common in fields like oncology, where you look at total number of tumors that may have occurred, or even our heart failure colleagues who look at heart failure-related hospitalizations.
Okay, so let's get back to the guy in the clinic.
Sure.
Our cardiology friends out there. What do they take home from this trial?
Well, I think there's two important take-home messages. One is that intensive lipid-lowering therapy is important to continue long-term, even after you've had an event. So more aggressive therapy, for example, using combination therapy with ezetimibe plus simvastatin is better than using just a moderate intensive simvastatin alone. I think the other important point that comes out of this analysis is that we should be considering not just the first event that occurs in a patient, but really all of the events that occur, because they impact the patient's quality of life, their morbidity and mortality, and they also obviously have a huge impact on patient management and on costs.
Okay, so ezetimibe and simvastatin actually is a good thing to have if you had an acute coronary syndrome. For me, candidly, if I'm taking care of a patient, I think if their LDLs are still up a little higher and they're not doing so well, just add the second drug and I probably will get some benefit. Is that a fair summary of everything?
I think that's a fair take home. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.